there's lots of hopelessness and helplessness that comes up sometimes when you're pursuing a major that you're not really invested in, which is why it's so important to think about, is this something that you genuinely have an interest in? If not, you probably shouldn't be pursuing it, rather than hoping that one day you'll love it.
Hi, I'm Kira Yakubov, licensed marriage and family therapist and founder of Heal Your Roots Wellness Practice. Every episode, we talk with a professional from the mental health field to learn more about their approaches and specialties, and also their journey of becoming a therapist. In this podcast, we'll uncover a deeper look at the world of therapy from new perspectives. You'll meet the therapists of Heal Your Roots Wellness Practice and trusted colleagues from the community tackling mental well-being. We're your go-to network for practical and professional insight in mental health. Subscribe for new episode releases every other Wednesday. So welcome back. We have Elijah Jackson here with us again. He joined us last season, and I'm so excited to have you back on today, Elijah.
Absolutely. It's good to be back.
So I know when we were kind of discussing what we wanted to focus on today, we were kind of thinking about what you've been seeing a lot recently and kind of the presenting issues that a lot of clients are coming in with. And we've noticed that a lot of your clients are in that, young adult, in college, kind of young professional age range, and struggling to figure out if this career or this major is the right thing for them, and how kind of family or cultural backgrounds might really influence that decision. So what's that been like for you to kind of see that trend coming up?
Most of my clients are actually in college now. And maybe that's just the nature of private practice. There are more college kids going through it, so there are more college kids looking for therapists. But I've definitely found that most people who have been in school have gravitated towards me, which has been really fun. It kind of makes me reminiscent of myself back in college and where I was and how lost I was then, and kind of trying to figure out what was best for me, and as opposed to what was best for everyone in my family, or managing other people's expectations. So it's kind of enlightening, and also makes me feel like I'm loving my job more because I get to help younger people.
Oh, that's sweet. And I also remember feeling super lost in college, and even just like going through the end of high school trying to figure out like what is it that I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life. And I'm supposed to decide this as a teenager, having no life experience, no knowledge, nothing about what would actually make sense for me and my strengths and my personality. No, that wasn't really well thought through, and not a great expectation to have of teenagers.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous that at 18 years old we're expected to have it all figured out, and you know what you want to do for the next 40 years. It just doesn't make a lick of sense to me, but I find that the less pressure you put on yourself, the easier it gets. Because people are going to have expectations of you all the time. People are going to, project onto you all the time. So as long as you have your house in order, it usually makes the transition through life better.
And so it's interesting because when I was thinking back during my college days, I didn't know, right, what I wanted to do. And I think it's kind of this like outdated or older generation thinking you have to pick one thing and that's going to be the thing you do forever, because that's kind of what it was like before, right? Like a lot of people would stay at one actual job for 20, 30, 40 years. So it wasn't really like, oh, I can try this out for a little bit and then explore a new career later in life. I don't think that was accessible or normal back in the day, or for like our parents' generation. So I think they're giving that advice from their circumstances and what, their lived experience, versus
Absolutely.
Now it's like you can have many different careers and different career paths and do multiple things at once and switch it up. And that's totally okay.
Absolutely. and I think also, in terms of like lots of like first generations, like kids who are going to school, their parents didn't have that background. So it's like their parents don't know necessarily to tell their kids that it's okay to, to move around or to change careers. Their parents might have high expectations for them because they're like, oh, we're shelling out a lot of money for you to go to school, or we're investing a lot into you, so we want you to do something awesome. We want you to be the doctor. We want you to be the lawyer.
Yeah.
We want you to save the world or change the world or at least change us. And then that puts a lot of pressure on kids to make up for their parents' sins or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I find that with most of my clients now, when they're navigating majors that are stressing them out, they're navigating majors that were chosen by their parents.
Yeah.
So it's kids who went to school to be a doctor when they never wanted to be a doctor in the first place, or kids who are in law school when they never wanted to be in law school in the first place. Not to say that those are bad professions; those are amazing professions. But if you're not invested into it, if it wasn't your choice, if you don't have any interest in it, then you're not going to probably have a good time, and it's going to make you more stressful.
Yeah.
You're trying to make something fit that doesn't fit.
Yeah. And I was actually thinking about earlier, like, what are these main professions, the most common ones, especially for immigrant families or, different people of color, that the main jobs that our parents want and expect of us is doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the main ones. And it was interesting to think about because I think that the intentions from the parents are good, right? They see these careers as very prestigious. They make money. It's a secure job. They're very well respected. And it's very useful in the family to have one or a combination of those professions. And
Absolutely.
like you said, and especially for those, I feel like you have to have a lot of passion and desire for that specifically because all of those careers are hard as shit. Like the
Yes.
actual job, but the preparation, the schooling, all of that is so draining and it takes so much out of you. For you to not even
Absolutely.
actually like it or want to do it seems kind of insane.
they're they're going through it in a way that I could never imagine.
Yeah.
I had a hard time in school, but to be in medical school in rotations, having people's lives in your hands in a certain way,
Yeah.
and you're not even really that invested in the work, it makes it more difficult to feel like you should be there.
Yeah.
And they constantly have thoughts around, is this worth it? Am I doing the right thing? Am I just taking up someone else's space that deserves to
Mm.
be here more than I do because they want to be here? There's so many ambivalent thoughts that come up for them, um, and it's difficult. It's difficult to navigate. I could only imagine what it feels like to be in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
And there's also the added layer of like financial investment. So it's like these programs aren't cheap.
No.
Lots of these commitments are, something you may have to be paying off in student loans forever. There's also the added shackles of having to navigate the like student debt.
Yeah.
Once you sign up for it, lots of people feel like they can't stop because they just invested too much into it.
Yeah.
So there's lots of hopelessness and helplessness that comes up sometimes
Mm.
when you're pursuing a major that you're not really invested in. Which is why it's so important to think about, is this something that you genuinely have an interest in? If not, you probably shouldn't be pursuing it, rather
Yeah.
than hoping that one day you'll love it.
Yeah. And man, it's so true because the financial piece is heavy, right? And I think a lot of times in any decision we make, right? Like the more time or money we invest in it, even if we don't find it beneficial or it's good for us, we kind of double down. We're like, well, if I already went this far, I might as well keep going instead of kind of stopping and assessing, like, let me cut my losses because I still have the rest of my life to pivot and do something different or pay this off in some other way. versus like, let me just push through and try to get to the other side. And then you graduate and then you get a job and you push through, and now you're dealing with like chronic depression or anxiety on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And so much guilt too.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of guilt and shame that comes up for people who pursue degrees that they don't want, and they feel like they're stuck in this space where they're like, "Oh, I don't want to be here, but everyone's telling me that I'm so great and amazing for doing this.
Mhm.
Everyone's like so proud of me, and I'm not enjoying it. I'm complaining, I'm, punishing myself. I'm making everyone else's day not good. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of guilt and shame that comes with that. So I think it's really important that, when I sit down with clients, I, I try to normalize that their experience is okay,
Mhm.
telling them that, sometimes telling them that being in a space and being ambivalent about it is all right. You know,
Yeah.
Stages of change, say that we're allowed to be ambivalent sometimes. We get to a space eventually, where we feel more secure and like we can make a choice to do something different if we want to. But being in a space where we can identify a problem and not really know if we want to change it yet, that's completely normal.
Mhm. And talk about the level of imposter syndrome, right? I mean, people around you are saying, "Yeah, you're doing great. This is incredible." And you're like, "Oh my God, I'm barely trying to keep it together. Like everyone's gonna find out. Oh my God."
Absolutely.
It sounds really tough. And I like that you
Absolutely.
normalize it because it is the ambivalence, right? I think that's the piece that makes people so uncomfortable and it's unsettling. Because at least if it's a decision that you don't want, you're already in it, right? And like now you're trying to
Mhm.
navigate it versus like kind of tiptoeing the line of which way you should go. It's tough
Absolutely.
to stay in that ambivalent space for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. You put so much stress and pressure on yourself to change things overnight, and this goes for anyone. Anyone who's experiencing hardship. Even I put pressure on myself whenever I see a problem. I'm like, all right, well, this has to be fixed right now. Even though you might not have the knowledge or the time or the energy to put into changing it,
Mm-hmm.
there's still that pressure to get it done immediately. Um, Especially, I found like for like immigrant and people of color families, there's the perfectionism aspect as well. So it's like we want to make sure that you are perfect. We want to make sure that you are the most marketable. You have to work 2 times as hard
Mm-hmm.
to get just a modicum of success, than the average privileged person. We have to make sure that everything that you do is exceptional.
Yeah.
And that pressure, that doesn't go unnoticed by kids. That doesn't go unnoticed by young adults. And usually it's internalized. It's not processed correctly. And we end up in spaces where we're not acknowledging that we need help. We're not acknowledging that we need support or that we're even not enjoying what we're doing. We're just
Mm.
forgetting about all of it and, turning that into fuel.
Yeah. That's so true. And I mean, I'm thinking about like some of my clients and their parents, but also my parents, because, I immigrated here and even just bringing home homework that was an A, it wasn't 100, it was like a 97. And my dad's like, "What happened? You couldn't do better?" It's like, damn, and having like that's just a piece of homework, let alone like a career and like everything else, like you're saying, and even being able to not feel safe enough to say, like, I don't enjoy this, I'm struggling, I need help, I'm anxious or depressed is like this isn't a real thing. You need to get it together and figure it out on your own. Stop doing all these extracurriculars and focus back on the main goal, which is this career and making money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They, we put so much pressure on ourselves, and students put so much pressure on
Mhm.
themselves to, if they're going to do it, they're going to do all of it. I'm going to have the perfect life. I'm going to have all the extracurriculars. I'm going to have all the friends. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to do it all. And I'm like, hold on, let's slow down a bit. Let's focus on what's necessary right now. And then if we have space after that, if we have more of a capacity for more, then we can think about more. But assigning all of these different responsibilities onto yourself, in your first semester of medical school or your first semester of law school,
Yeah.
it sounds like you're taking on way too much too soon.
Yeah. And that's how we get burnout super quickly with no end in mind, right? Like the burnout isn't just I'm struggling right now, it's I'm struggling and I don't know when it's going to end. It's much harder to hold
Absolutely.
on when you don't know when there's an end date to it.
Absolutely. Burnout is, I feel like that's probably the number one cause of, um, midlife crises.
Yeah.
I think people work so hard in their younger years because they're told that they have to work hard in their younger years to
Mhm.
make their later years easier. And then they forget that they're people and that they have bodies and that sometimes our bodies have limits. Um, and it spirals, and then they hit like 30 or they hit 40, and they're like, oh, I don't think I could work for another 30, years. I
Yeah.
don't think I can do another 20 years of this.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's really important to reassess early, like right after you graduate high school
Mhm.
or right after you graduate college. Reassess, what do I really want? What's really important to me, and what do I want to achieve in my life? What are my values? As opposed to what are the values that I was taught.
Mhm.
And sometimes it might take some time to figure that out. Which is why I never say it's a bad idea to take a gap year.
Mhm.
Take a little time off and try to do a little self discovery if it's within the cards. Take some time to focus on yourself and explore your own interests. Maybe take an internship somewhere.
Mhm.
Or volunteer somewhere and see if you like it. As opposed to just setting these really high expectations of yourself that sometimes aren't even your own expectations.
Yeah. And I love how you express needing to take time to assess on your own and focus on those morals and values. Because I feel like at 18, 19, even 20, 21, like really like all the way up to your mid 20s, you're kind of listening to everybody else around you, getting their input, getting way too much input, and from like you said earlier, like people who are projecting. And so that reflection period is so critical that a lot of, I think maybe not a lot of teenagers do because they might not be prompted to do it, not recognize that that's like an option, or just rely on everyone else's opinion. But I think like, and I love giving this exercise to clients. I usually do it when they're dating, but this applies like at any time in your life, is really assessing what are your morals and values, right? Like having a list of them, picking out the ones that really speak to you, making a category for each one and kind of reflecting, like you said, is this my value or is this something that's been passed down to me? And like, why is this important? How would my life look if this wasn't a part of it? Right? And like, what are the consequences of that? And having those real life experiences, those internships are so valuable and priceless because, we can be in school and learning and like reading books, and that's just like one level of it versus going out and implementing it. You're like, whoa, that's not, it's not what I signed up for, even though it is what I signed up for.
Absolutely. I know firsthand my experience even in school myself. I had I didn't know what the hell I was talking about as far as therapy until I started doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like reading all the books, learning about all the theories, that's one thing. But actually practicing and being in the room with another person,
Yeah.
that's a completely different experience. And I even had to, I had to have my own come to Jesus moment where I was like, oh, hey, this is nothing like they say it is in the books. There's so much more. There's so much more that's needed. There's so much more that's required. I have to be so much more aware and involved
Mm-hmm.
um, than my teachers told me that I had to be. Um, I have to think about my own self in the room, and I have to remember that I'm a person too, and I'm not just a platform. Um, I'm like, this is a lot. So I had to have my own realization moment, and thankfully I came out on the other side with more clarity about what I want to do. But sometimes people don't have that moment of reflection.
Yeah.
They're not given that moment of reflection because they're told that they have to just keep going. Just keep pushing, get through it. You only
Mm-hmm.
have a few more years. It wouldn't make sense to quit now. Just get through it. When really we need to be maximizing on today,
Mm-hmm.
and saying, okay, let's think about what we really want now. Let's take a little bit of a break and explore what really matters to us, as opposed to this thing we've been telling ourselves forever.
Yeah. And I think some of the best, maybe not the best ways, but some of the beneficial ways to do that is obviously through therapy, right? I mean, I know we're biased because we're therapists, but having an objective person who doesn't have a stake in the game. It's not your parents, not your friends. They're not going to be disappointed in you or expect anything of you, to just let all these thoughts and emotions out. And then also journaling, right? Like being able to also express this in a way that is freeing and safe. But I think that something I wish I had done when I was earlier when I was going through school, is because I went originally for accounting, because my dad said, "Oh, you're good at math and it's a good stable job for a woman, and you'll get married and your husband will make the money anyway. So what difference does it make?" I was like, "Cool, cool, dad." and then And then I got into college and I started, going for an accounting major. And then Drexel University had a co-op program where I got to do an internship at a tax firm. And that first week I was like, this is 1,000% not for me. And there's no way in hell I can keep doing this for the next 2 to 3 years in school, let alone after that. And I wish that I reached out to other people in the psychology field or in the accounting field who are already working, to be like, can you just like give me an inside scoop of what is your day to day? How do you feel? What are the best and worst parts of your job or this field? To get more of that insight, instead of, you should just do it because you're good at it. And I think it's a good thing for your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, sometimes making a career out of something that you're really good at usually ends up becoming one of the most stressful things in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like people who are artists and they go to art school, and they try to make a career out of being an artist. They sometimes they lose their excitement for art because it just becomes a part of the job.
Yeah.
Um, I have a client who's pursuing, a degree in design, and now that they're doing it every day, and it's not so much for fun and creation, it's for, to try to find a job.
Yeah.
Um, it's not as enjoyable to them anymore. So you really have to think deeply about, if this thing that you're doing every day was a job, would it feel fulfilling for you? Would it be as exciting for you as it is now? And of course, every day of your life and you're at work isn't going to be amazing and
Sure.
great. Um, but the majority of it should feel good,
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't, then maybe you might want to reassess, and that goes for anyone with any job. If it's just for the paycheck, can you do a just for the paycheck job for the rest of your life? You know,
Yeah.
I know I can't. I don't think that's sustainable for me.
No, me neither.
I have to have some kind of connection to
Yeah.
it.
I mean, it helps that we're in the field where we literally have to interact with people. And that would be really tough. But we're like, no, I hate this. I don't want to hear about your problems. But that's how I felt
Oh
about the
no.
accounting firm. I was like, I can't do this every day. Like, no way. I need more interaction with people. And it's interesting because I think the more experience we have in something, the more we're able to reassess and like, okay, this aspect of this job or this interaction I like it, but this other aspect is definitely not going to work for me. So it's even kind of
Absolutely.
just like playing around with these different things and
Absolutely.
thinking about that first and then trying to apply it maybe to a future, right? Like, I
Absolutely.
mean, so really it's like just getting to know yourself on a much deeper level.
Absolutely. Which is why I wish there was more opportunities for students in like high school, middle school to explore their interests
Hmm.
and explore their niches in these environments, rather than saying, figure it out on your own and then you're going to go to your guidance counselor and tell them what you want to do. Um, I think that instead there should be actual things in the curriculum, in high school and middle school curriculums to help people think more about their future
Mm-hmm.
in a way, like I never got that opportunity in high school and middle school to like think about, oh, well, what do you actually want to do? What do you have an interest in?
Mm-hmm.
It was more so just what colleges do you want to get into?
Yep.
And what grades do you need to get into this college? And not so much, well, what do you actually want to do when you get there? What do you want to explore? What are your interests?
Mm-hmm.
And we should have those opportunities to explore those things, young, so that we can get a better idea about what this career entails. Because of course a 15-year-old could be like, oh yeah, I want to be a doctor. That looks cool, but they don't know what it actually means to be a doctor and how much it takes to get there.
Sure.
I know I didn't. That was the first thing my father told me when I told him I wanted to go to college. He was like, "Well, you're going to get a PhD,
Oh my
and you're going to pay off all our debt." And I was like, "Hold on, that's a lot. That's a lot." So yeah, I mean, expectations are high, and we have to make sure it's really for us.
Yeah. How do you like to help clients who, whether they've already decided that they want to switch or do something different, and like having some of these conversations with their parents, particularly from, different backgrounds that aren't just born in America?
I always think the most important part is to make sure that we're not absorbing other people's, uh, negativity. Um, so we already know that that's going to be a hard conversation
Mm-hmm.
because parents have high expectations. Parents might be living through you in some ways.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I never got to go to medical school. I never got to go to law school, so I want you to do it. So you going against that, going against the grain in that way might cause some tension. It might bring up some things for the parents. So it's best to make sure that you don't internalize and absorb the things that they're saying to you,
Yeah.
because it can go if you're telling yourself that they're correct and they're right and that you're doing the wrong thing,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to change.
Yeah.
It's going to feel, you're going to feel like guilty. The guilt and shame is going to come up again,
Yep.
and you're not going to want to do what's really important to you. To discover what you want to do. So I always say that self-talk is so important. It informs so much of our decisions.
Mm-hmm.
If we're telling ourselves we're not worthy, if we're telling ourselves we're doing the wrong thing, if we're telling ourselves that we don't trust ourselves, we're not going to act in our best interest. We're usually going to try to stay comfortable,
Mm.
which most times isn't even really comfortable.
Sure. It's just familiar. It's just what we're used to. And I think man, it's really tough. I mean, I literally had to have that conversation with my parents, and I've had clients who also. And the biggest thing that helped me was having someone else in my corner, even if it was one person that was like, you know what, I do think this is a good idea, or I support you trying something different or thinking about it, right? Because, like you said, that self talk is really critical and it's hard. I mean, of course, we're going to question ourselves if we don't have that much experience or knowledge, but having someone
Absolutely.
else who does support us and has our best interest in mind makes such a huge difference. And I'll never forget this. And I'm really thankful that when I told my parents, like, I don't want to do accounting, this is horrible for me. I want to go into psych and I want to be a therapist. And these Eastern European parents looked at me like I just shot them through the heart. I was like, are you out of your mind? Like, the pressure. We came to America, we sacrificed so much for you
Mhm.
to help quote unquote crazy people. Like, are you insane? And they were like, totally no, because they were helping me pay for college. And then my one brother was like, you know what? Do some research, look up what kind of jobs you would get that sound interesting, what they would pay, and what you would need to do to get them. And if you can get that information and share it to me, I'll back you up to the parents. And I did
Mhm.
that, which was helpful for me to understand. And in my culture, if the man says that you could do something, even if it's my brother, they're like, all right, well, I guess you can do it since he said it's a good idea, even though it's my
Right.
life, right? But having someone in your corner makes such a big difference to keep pushing through that
Mhm.
resistance from your family.
Absolutely. Support is so necessary. if we feel like there's no one really rooting for us, if we feel like there's no one who's telling us, even saying, I trust you,
Mm-hmm.
I trust that you're going to do what's best for yourself, it can make decisions harder. So we have to make sure that we're creating communities for ourselves that reflect that. We might not always get that support at home.
Yeah.
So we have to look for it elsewhere, with our friends, or, with our peers in school, with authority figures like your teachers
Mm-hmm.
and, um, sometimes your parents aren't always going to think about, what you want. They're going to think about what they think is best for you,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So it's you got to make sure that you have someone that's actually listening to what you're saying.
Yeah. Some kind of mentor or friend or someone in your community. Yeah, that can just provide that positivity in your ear.
Absolutely. I know I had it. I definitely, as much as I talk crap about guidance counselors. Mine was very supportive. She, every time I came up to her with an interest, she would say, I trust you. I trust you know what you're doing. You're doing what's best for you, and that's what matters.
Mm,
So it's good to have those supportive people, especially
yeah.
adults. When an adult tells you that they trust you and that you're doing the right thing, it kind of makes you feel more motivated.
Yeah.
But sometimes the kids get it, your peers get it,
Sure.
but not the adults.
Yeah. And it's just that boost of confidence, like hearing an adult, hearing someone say, I trust you to make a good decision. It's like, wow. Okay. So I want to make sure I make a good decision and think it through and make this person proud.
Absolutely, and it's never too late to change.
Mm-hmm.
Signing up for medical school or law school or any of those big ones, that takes a lot of financial commitment,
Yeah.
but if still, even then, I don't believe that's enough to stay in it forever.
Yeah.
You can find something else. You can pivot. You can choose what's best for you. It's never too late to discover what your niche is.
Absolutely. And I think especially now where a lot of people don't stay at the same job for a really long time, or they learn new skills or they try different things. Like, you're allowed to have different parts of you that develop, and maybe you go into a particular career that you did actually like and you did want to do and you have enjoyed it, and now there's certain circumstances in your life or it's no longer doing it for you. You're allowed to pivot, right? Like, quitting something is not a bad thing. I think knowing when
Right?
to quit, knowing when to let go is actually super powerful and not a weakness at all.
Absolutely. I've had peers who have gone into therapy as a second career.
Mhm.
They had some kind of like high profile job that didn't really feel very fulfilling for them. It felt kind of soul sucking in some ways. And then, they're like, I need something that actually makes me feel like I'm contributing to the world.
Yeah.
So they would go into social work or they would go into therapy, where they feel more invested in their communities. It really, there's never too late. And these people, you would think sometimes some people might say, oh, well, why would you wait till you're in your 50s to do that? And I'm like, it's never too late to change.
Yeah.
You still have a very fulfilling life ahead of you. You're never running out of time. Um, and I think, older adults tend to tell themselves that they're always running out of time to do the things that they want to do.
Mhm.
And I'm like, no, you have plenty of time. You might not be able to act on it right now because there are things in the way, but that doesn't mean that won't change in the future.
Sure.
Just be patient with yourself.
Mm,
Patience is so important.
it is. It's very underrated because everything takes time, right? And even the way we feel one day to the next about something changes. Like, I like to tell clients, especially when they're in certain careers that they did pick on their own and choose, it's that learning curve is going to take time, or there's going to be certain things in your life that are going to make it harder to show up for work each day, and not seeing all of it in the lens of just this one particular experience or feeling. Like, okay, like, let me write this down and journal it. Let me think about in a week when I come back to reread this, do I still feel the same way? Right? Or in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because, every day we change and we feel something different. And, we make these assumptions about ourselves. Like, if I felt this way this week, then this must be the worst thing in the world.
Absolutely. I think it's always whenever we have a bad day, we're kind of like, oh, life is horrible forever. But like, no, it's just today is bad. Not every day. So sometimes it's important to take a little perspective and be like, okay, yes, today was bad, but yesterday was good.
Hmm.
Or last week was good. I might be having a bad week now. It might be horrible now, but sometimes you have to take a little perspective and say, not every day was bad. And bad days are almost guaranteed in the future.
Mm-hmm.
You can't avoid it. It's just a part of life. But, was every day bad? Was every day horrible? I don't think so.
I hope not.
And if it was, did definitely need to make some changes.
Yeah.
But I promise you, most times, not every day of your life is going to be horrible. So think more about those good days too, instead of focusing only on the bad one.
Sure. Absolutely. And something that I was just came to my mind when we were talking about more so like explaining to, those parents and everything is learning is going to be a really tough one. Learning to accept that they will be disappointed and letting it be.
Absolutely. I think for for parents, they do a lot of lots of parents like to live through their kids. So it's like, oh, I created you, so you're kind of an extension of me, and I want to be proud of this extension. I want this extension of myself to be able to do some of the things that I've never been able to do.
Yeah.
And I want them to be secure and happy and all of this. And, sometimes the intention is good.
Mm-hmm.
And most times the intention is good when it comes to parents having expectations. But, they kind of forget that this extension of yourself that you created is also an autonomous being who can make their own choices, and they're not tied to you at the hip, and they're going to want their own lives, and they're allowed to have that.
How dare they?
I've had many a conversation with my parents about that. I'm like, yeah, I get it. You have these big goals for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I like these goals. I think that they sound good on paper, but I don't know about in practice.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to try something different.
Mm-hmm.
And they're allowed to go through their own. They can go through the motions and feel that grief. That their kid doesn't want to do what they want them to do. You're entitled to your feelings, but that doesn't change the reality that your kids should be able to explore what they want to explore.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times when parents are super pushy, it goes kind of one of two ways. I mean, obviously, there's a million different ways it can go, but the most common that I've seen is one is like, okay, I'm going to do whatever they say, anything to make them happy, go through this career, all of this stuff. And they end up being very depressed, have an identity crisis throughout all of it. And at some point, get really ill, right? Like they have to take time off in some way, or they rebel. Like, I'm going to do the complete opposite. Fuck you. Fuck these expectations. I'm going to be my own person and really go against the grain in some other direction. And sometimes it's good for them, and other times it's not the best because, if we're only making a decision based on out of spite to somebody, that's not in our best interest either, right?
I think parents really need to give their kids time to explore their interests. Because even you get a lot of pressure at school to be like, where do you want to go to school? What do you want to do? We'll get this paperwork in, let's do this. And then you get the same kind of messaging at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important that, younger people have the opportunity to explore their interests and not feel that pressure from their parents, because, they're going to make rash decisions when they feel pressured.
Yeah.
They're not going to be fully confident in what they're doing when they feel pressured.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just going to lead to more stress and unhappiness.
Yeah.
So I really feel like being a supportive parents are never bad parents. Accepting parents are never bad parents. Having a parent that's going to trust you is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
They may be young, but they are not imbeciles. They understand themselves. They understand what they want. They understand, what they would like their life to look like. They may have fantastical, feelings about one certain thing, or, they may have a niche interest that you don't understand, but they're still autonomous beings who want things for themselves. So parents kind of, loosen up the reins a bit.
Absolutely. I feel like this was like a parenting 101 by Elijah. Get it together.
Get it together. That'll be my tagline.
That's so funny. So I know we're coming close to an end. Unfortunately, I feel like we could talk about this and other things for a super long time. Is there any last like thoughts or anything that you would want, listeners or potential clients to hear about how you show up in the room, particularly around like this topic?
Get it together. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I just think that, don't come to me looking for someone to tell you what to do. I am a safe space for you to explore whatever you want to explore, and most therapists should be.
Hmm.
I think lots of clients might come to therapy looking for them to answer the big question and give them the key to access all of these things, and I'm like, no, we're gonna. I want you to remember that you're in the driver's seat here. This is your life. You know yourself better than anyone, and I'm just a facilitator. I'm here to facilitate the safe space. Um, and I really think it's important that clients remember you know, how strong they are and how capable they are, and usually how resilient they are.
Yeah.
You know, so if there's ever a problem you're going through, you most likely know the answer.
Mm, awesome. Well, if anybody wants to work with Elijah, please head over to healyourrootswellness.com and schedule a consult, and we'll see if this will be a good match. But I want to say, Elijah, thank you so much for making the time today to talk to me, to make this episodes. I hope this really helps a lot of people that might be confused or struggling through their career path right now, and it gives them a little bit of insight.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right, it's a wrap.